Think your old, worn-out Washington quarters are worthless? Think again. In today's video, we're counting down the top 3 Washington quarter-dollar coins in bad condition that still hold impressive value. Don't toss that old change just yet. First up, today, we're diving into the story of the 1995 Washington quarter-dollar coin, specifically in bad or heavily circulated condition. You might think a scratched, worn-out quarter from 1995 isn't worth much, and in most cases you'd be right. But as with many coins, there's more to the story than just the date on the front. The Washington quarter was originally introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. Over the decades, the design became one of the most recognizable in U.S. coinage. By 1995, the Washington quarter had been circulating for over 60 years, and the Denver Mint played a major role in producing them. The 1995 D quarter was struck at the Denver Mint, which is why you'll see a small D mint mark on the right side of Washington's ponytail on the coin's obverse. In 1995, over 1.1 billion Washington quarters were minted in Denver alone. That's right, more than 1.1 billion. This high mintage means that 1995 D quarters are generally very common. Most of them were used in everyday transactions and have seen decades of wear and tear. So, what does that mean for value? In heavily circulated or bad condition, the 1995 D Washington quarter is typically worth only face value, 25 cents. If the coin has scratches, loss of detail, discoloration, or signs of heavy use, it unfortunately holds no extra value for most collectors. However, there are a few important exceptions. Some 1995 D quarters contain minting errors, and those can be worth significantly more. Error coins are highly sought after in the numismatic world because they represent mistakes that slipped through the minting process. For example, some 1995 D quarters may exhibit doubling. This is known as a double die error. You'd typically look at areas like the words "Liberty," "In God We Trust," or the date 1995. If there's noticeable doubling in any of those areas, the coin could be worth $10, $50, or even more depending on the severity of the error and the condition. Another error to watch for is the off-center strike. This happens when the coin is not properly aligned in the press and is struck off-center. A small off-center error might not add much value, but a more dramatic one, say 10% to 30% off-center, can easily push the value into the $20 to $100 range, even in bad condition. Also, be on the lookout for clipped planchets, die cracks, cuds, or misaligned dies. These are rare, but they do exist, and collectors pay good money for them, even if the rest of the coin is worn. Now let's clear up a common misconception. Some people think their 1995 D quarter might be silver. But here's the truth. Quarters minted from 1965 onward are made from a copper nickel-clad composition, not silver. So, unless the coin is a special minting error on a silver planchet, which would be extremely rare, it doesn't have any silver melt value. If you want silver quarters, you'll need to look for coins dated 1964 or earlier. To sum it up, the 1995 D Washington quarter in bad condition is usually worth only 25 cents. It's one of the most common modern quarters due to its massive mintage. However, if your coin has a mint error, like a double die, off-center strike, or a clipped planchet, it could still be worth significantly more, even if it's heavily worn. So before you toss that old quarter in your change jar, take a closer look. A magnifying glass and a few extra seconds might be all it takes to spot a valuable variety hiding in plain sight. Next up, we're going to take a closer look at the 1968 Washington quarter-dollar coin, especially when it's in bad condition. Many people wonder if their older pocket change might have hidden value, even if it's scratched, worn down, or heavily circulated. So, let's explore the history, production, and potential value of the 1968 quarter. The Washington quarter was first issued in 1932 to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. It was intended to be a one-year commemorative coin, but due to its popularity, the design became the permanent replacement for the standing Liberty quarter. For decades, the obverse of the coin has featured a profile of George Washington, and the reverse showed an eagle with outstretched wings perched on a bundle of arrows, with olive branches beneath, symbolizing both strength and peace. The year 1968 marked a significant shift in American coin production. Just 3 years earlier, in 1965, the U.S. Mint had removed silver from circulating dimes and quarters due to rising silver prices and coin hoarding. Prior to that, quarters were made of 90% silver. But starting in 1965, including the 1968 quarter, the U.S. Mint switched to a copper-nickel-clad composition. That means the 1968 Washington quarter has no silver content and is made with an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel, bonded to a core of pure copper. In 1968, Washington quarters were minted at 3 locations: Philadelphia, Denver, and for the first time in many years, San Francisco. However, there's a key difference in the 1968 S quarters. They were only made as proof coins for collectors and not meant for circulation. If you happen to have a 1968 S proof quarter, it would likely have a mirrored surface and sharp details. But in bad condition, it's unlikely you have one of these unless it was removed from a set and damaged. Most 1968 quarters found in circulation will have either a D mint mark for Denver or no mint mark at all, indicating Philadelphia. Over 101 million quarters were struck at the Denver Mint, while the Philadelphia Mint struck over 220 million coins. That means the 1968 quarter is fairly common, especially if it's been circulated for decades and shows heavy signs of wear. Now let's talk about value. If your 1968 Washington quarter is in bad condition, meaning it has significant wear, scratches, nicks, or discoloration, it will generally be worth only its face value of 25 cents. These coins were produced in large numbers and without silver content or collectible quality. Worn examples are not rare. However, there are always a few exceptions that can make even a bad condition coin worth more than you'd expect. One thing to watch out for is mint errors. While not extremely common, some 1968 quarters may have striking mistakes that slipped through quality control. These can include off-center strikes, die cracks, clipped planchets, or double die obverses. Even in bad condition, error coins can fetch prices ranging from $10 to over $100, depending on how dramatic and rare the error is. For example, a minor off-center strike might sell for a few dollars, while a noticeable die break or doubled die could bring in much more from collectors interested in unique pieces. Another factor to consider is if your 1968 quarter, somehow, ended up struck on the wrong planchet, like a nickel or a foreign coin blank. These extremely rare minting anomalies are highly sought after and can be valuable even if the coin looks worn out. It's always worth taking a second look with a magnifier or having a professional evaluate your coin if you suspect something unusual. To be clear, the vast majority of 1968 quarters in circulation today have no special errors and no silver content. So unless yours has a unique minting anomaly or comes from a proof set, a heavily worn 1968 quarter is almost always worth just 25 cents. But for coin collectors, it's not always about high value. It's also about the story behind each coin, the history it represents, and the thrill of discovering something rare in your pocket change. Next up, today, we're taking a closer look at a fascinating coin that many people overlook, the 1982 D Washington quarter dollar. This quarter might seem like just another piece of everyday change, but when we dig into the history and value, we uncover some surprising facts, especially considering what was happening with U.S. coin production in the early 1980s. The Washington quarter design has been a fixture of American coinage since 1932, originally issued to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. The obverse features a left-facing portrait of Washington, designed by John Flanagan, and the reverse shows an eagle with wings spread, standing on a bundle of arrows with olive branches below, a symbol of peace, backed by strength. This classic design was used all the way until the state quarters began in 1999. Now, the year 1982 was a turning point for the U.S. Mint. Due to budget cuts and inflation, the Mint made some unusual decisions that year. One of the most significant was that they stopped producing uncirculated mint sets entirely, meaning no mint sets were sold to the public for either 1982 or 1983. Because of that, collectors today find it much harder to locate high-grade examples of 1982 coins, especially the quarters. Most of the coins that exist from those 2 years are circulated examples, used in everyday commerce and now heavily worn. The 1982 D Washington quarter was struck at the Denver Mint, as indicated by the small D mint mark, located on the right side of Washington's ponytail. The Denver Mint produced over 480 million of these quarters, so by numbers alone, they're not rare. But because of the lack of mint sets and how few people saved them in pristine condition, uncirculated or high-grade examples are actually much more valuable than you'd expect. Let's talk about the coin's composition. Like all quarters minted, after 1964, the 1982 D is made of a copper nickel clad, a layer of copper sandwiched between layers of nickel. There's no silver in this coin, so it doesn't have intrinsic metal value. However, what it does have is collector interest, particularly if the coin is in great shape or has a notable error. Now let's talk about value. In bad condition, or heavy circulation, a 1982 D Washington quarter is generally worth just its face value of 25 cents. These are the coins you'll find in pocket change, scratched, worn, and showing signs of decades of use. But if the coin is in uncirculated condition or near mint state, it could be worth anywhere from $5 to $25 and possibly even more depending on the grade. Mint state 65 and higher examples can sell for $50 or more, especially if they have strong strikes and no flaws. Why? Again, it all comes back to the fact that so few were saved in pristine condition. Now here's where things get even more interesting. Some 1982 D quarters have minting errors that make them stand out. One of the most famous is the No mint mark 1982 P quarter, which was actually struck in Philadelphia, but the Denver version has its own collectible quirks. Keep an eye out for coins with die breaks, off-center strikes, or even weak strikes, which can all add to a coin's value. Another interesting variety to look for is the small date versus large date design on the 1982 cents, which reflects how the mint was experimenting that year. While the 1982 D quarter doesn't have different types like the penny, the general instability in minting that year makes errors more common across denominations. So what should you look for if you have a 1982 D quarter? First, check the overall condition. Is it heavily worn with faded details? If so, it's likely worth only 25 cents. But if it has sharp features, good luster, and minimal wear, you might have something more valuable. Second, check for any oddities, double lettering, off-center strikes, or strange markings. Even small errors can increase a coin's value, especially for a year like 1982 when quality control was more unpredictable. To summarize, the 1982 D Washington quarter is a common coin in circulation, but thanks to the lack of mint sets that year, uncirculated examples are significant.